Hello and welcome back to this module on continuous delivery to continuous deployment. Well done, you've made it through 3 modules. This is the last module, and this is a module which takes you all the way from delivering on a continuous fashion in production, but through the change approvals and through someone actually pressing the button manually for you, to a fully automated process. This is full DevOps, right? This is what DevOps is all about. It's about having a process that allows you to go out to production, constantly deploy. And remember, constantly deploying something does not mean constantly releasing something. And the difference entails a whole new structure of practices that you need to follow. Practices such as feature flags, practices such as phased rollout, practices such as experimentation. And that's exactly what we plan to cover in this module. Now, just to set the context, the key difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment, as you can see on the slide, is continuous delivery is all about having a pipeline. But the step before releasing into production means you have a step approval process. And that step approval process in certain organizations could be a 5-minute job, could be a 5-day job. So sometimes it takes a long time to build that trust with the leadership team or the product owners and the product managers for them to allow you to roll out updates and deployments as and when. But that is the nirvana state, and that's what continuous deployment is. Continuous deployment is being able to just commit your code, have a high quality build output and artifact that gets added into a release train, and that a release train goes all the way out into production. Now, the unicorns, and when I say unicorns, I mean the Netflix, the Facebooks, and these companies that have redefined how technology works, have been doing these practices for a number of years now. But as you can see, more of these practices are becoming the norm in the industry, and a lot more organizations are onboarding them. And so when you go in a conference and say, we release 5 times a day, it doesn't have the same impact anymore as it used to a few years back. But when you go to a bank and say, we release 5 times a day, how many times do you release? They're like, whoa, 5 times a day, we probably do 1 release in 5 months. So for them to make a journey all the way to continuous deployment is quite a big challenge. And they have to go through the phases that we've talked about, get the CI right, make sure the CI is reliable, it's one that you believe in and one that you want to improve on. Then get to the continuous delivery stage, make sure you have the right quality factors built in, make sure you can validate that you have a good tangible product before you roll it out with the right approvals. And when you're at that stage, you go full Monty with continuous deployment, right? That's what DevOps is all about. So I've changed this picture again for Module 3 as we've covered CI, build automation, deploy, and test automation. We're going to focus on some of the practices of continuous deployment. And one that I'm personally very excited about is feature flags. And one that the product really allows you to do very easily now is staged deployments. Staged deployments you could do right from release management, where you could decide to roll out updates to selective canary instances. But Azure supports it quite broadly within web apps, wherein you can select and set up slots and then leverage those slots to phase in, phase out releases. And then at the tail end of the course, we'll look at App Insights and how you can put App Insights to work to get real-time telemetry back from production. We'll also look at a nifty feature available within App Insights that gives you the integration from Visual Studio Team Services and Azure to put a marker on App Insights, and it's called release annotation. When you look at the data that comes back from production and things don't work out, the first thing you ask is, did a release just go out? And that's what release annotations are. They just put a marker on your telemetry to say, this is a point where the release went out. And if after that point you see traffic going down or traffic significantly going up or certain exceptions or certain things happening, then you know that there's something fishy about this specific release. And that's an action point you can take away and investigate. So practices for continuous deployment. Like we talked about in continuous delivery, there are some industry standards and practices, and the same applies to continuous deployment. Now, I've listed some here. This just assumes that all the practices that we talked about when we talked about continuous delivery still apply. This is just stuff on top of that. And continuous deployment is about having an architecture that is microservices based. As I talked about previously, you cannot have a monolith application and service it in real time with multiple releases and deployments in a day, simply because every time a monolith goes down, there's a big impact. But when a service goes down, there's less impact. So that kind of architecture is more balanced and made for a continuous deployment mode of work. Work on a minimal viable product approach, MVP. It's good because it allows you to focus your attention on getting the most bare minimal done to get a feature out deployed and then start getting feedback from the field on whether it hits the mark of what was expected from it, whether you can evolve it further, and where there's scope for improvement. What you don't want to do is go build an Eiffel Tower and figure out that your customers didn't really need an Eiffel Tower, they just needed the Seattle Needle, and it would be too expensive then to go back and fix it. The other practice is never roll back. In this mode of work where we're talking about constantly releasing and deploying stuff, we can't have a rollback condition. Rollbacks don't work. In a mode of continuous deployment, you are immutable in your delivery. You have to fix it, and the process needs to be quick enough to allow the fixes to roll out as soon as they're ready. You cannot be successful with continuous deployment unless you have a way of measuring things that are happening in production in the live site. And that's where things like operation insights, app insights, telemetry, diagnostics are really, really useful. And with more of cloud platforms taking on this role, you would see they have native tools available that give you the high level and the drill down view of telemetry, operations insights, application insights, and then they allow eventing for when things happen, for things to happen, which means if infrastructure is damaged, self-heal, go restart, go do this, go run this script, which kind of helps you have the first level of checks and balances in place even before the issue gets to you. And you kind of need that if you want to move into a continuous deployment mode. Metrics. Have you ever had that conversation with someone who says, oh, we want to track what is the velocity of your team? And you're like, how does that help you in any way? What you should be measuring is a product level KPI. How many customers are moving on to the new version of the platform that we've rolled out? How many customers are buying the new features that we're developing? How many customers are becoming free to pro? These are the kind of metrics you're interested in. And when you start measuring those business metrics in IT, then it becomes a view of let's join up to deliver a product rather than let's join up to deliver a part of technology. And organizations that go full continuous deployment move away from just these mundane technology-centric KPIs to more business-focused KPIs. But it's a cultural shift, one that takes time to adapt. So let's get to the techniques of continuous deployment. The first technique I want to call out here is feature flags, one that we will cover in a demo as well. Feature flags are amazing. If you want to be continuously deploying stuff in production, you can't have this condition where oh, I'm going to take a week to create this stuff, so I'm not going to do a deployment for a week. Let me just add some plumbing, some server-level APIs, and let's just hide that behind a condition and roll that code out into production. And then let me, behind the scenes, enable that feature just for myself so I can keep invoking that API with production data to see whether it's resilient, whether it's giving me the responses I need, whether it's going to be able to scale. And likewise, when we develop new features in an application, we will only want to roll it out to a fair few to get feedback. We don't want to have to set up a test instance and invite them because the chances of that happening are quite low. But when you release in production and they say, look, we've just released this new feature, it's private, can you go and test it for me, give me feedback? Chances of that happening are high. But all of that works on the principle of feature flags. And we'll look at a couple of extensions that enable that. We'll work through that in a demo. The next one here is blue-green deployments. It's a good practice to have production-like environments available where you can roll out stuff. So as it says here, blue-green is a technique for deployments where the existing running deployment is left in place, a new version of the application is installed, and then a flip and a switchover happens. So if you're working in microservices, or if you're using Azure Service Fabric or any of those Service Fabric-oriented technologies, then you would see it's very, very easy to spin up a new host of your service, which has the new version of the software, direct the traffic to it, and then flip it over when you're kind of ready to roll it out. And that's a very popular topic and an approach that's available within Azure through Service Fabric, through web app in the form of slots. The other technique that's available is canary releases, and this is one that we'll look at in a demo, which basically means you do a phased deployment where you patch a few servers first, adjust your load balancer such that some traffic gets routed out to it, and then you can gauge whether it's working fine, and if it's all working fine, then you just roll that release out to all the other environments. The last one in the list is DevSecOps, and I'm calling it out for a reason here, is because as we all move to this DevOps way of working, we actually forgot that there's another department in the organization called security, and unless you take them in the fold, you'll still have a siloed organization, because trust me, the cost of a data breach today is higher than ever before. There is the financial cost, but then there's the cost of reputation, right? So if you are an organization that is holding customer data and that customer data gets leaked, then the amount of shame that brings to the brand is just fixable in a way. And not having security on board means you're exposing yourself, but having security on board means you kind of have to wait for their manual processes to be complete. And they might not be as swift and as quick in their validations as you may be in your dev and operations rollout. But having some sort of an automated way where you can take them in the fold in your own pipelines, automate part of what security does, means you can actually roll out a release with confidence, knowing that it's yes, automated, but it's secure at the same time. So we'll cover that off in one of the videos where we'll talk about some of the techniques and tools that are available to tick off the DevSecOps in the continuous deployment cycle. So that's it for the introduction. Join me. We have plenty of exciting technical content lined up in this module. Next, we're gonna start looking at phased deployments with release management.